$220,000 watch hidden under an $80 hoodie was about to expose a 22-year pattern of discrimination that would destroy 5 careers, reform an entire industry, and prove that real power doesn't scream, it whispers. But on the night of December 31st, 2024, as the worst blizzard in a decade buried New York City under 18 inches of snow, nobody at JFK Terminal 4 knew they were about to witness the beginning of a reckoning. Donovan Kane stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Delta Sky Club, watching ground crew in neon vests battle the elements. Ice crusted the glass in fractals, distorting the runway lights into starbursts. He took a slow sip of sparkling water, the bubbles sharp against his tongue. At 35, he carried himself with the kind of stillness that made people nervous, the quiet of a man who had nothing left to prove but everything to protect. His reflection stared back at him. Charcoal Loro Piana cashmere hoodie, the fabric so soft it felt like breathing clouds, reigning champ joggers in matching gray. White Common Project sneakers that cost more than most people's monthly car payments but looked like something from a clearance rack. To the untrained eye, he was an off-duty athlete, maybe a music producer trying to stay low profile. Certainly not the founder and CEO of EtherLogic, the tech acquisition firm that had just closed a $340 million deal 6 hours ago. The Patek Philippe Nautilus on his wrist told a different story, but Donovan kept it hidden beneath his cuff. Old habit. He'd learned early that wealth attracted the wrong kind of attention, and power wielded quietly cut deeper than any flex ever could. His phone buzzed. Text from Natasha Bellamy, his chief legal officer, already in London. Board confirmed for January 2nd, 9 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Titan's counsel is nervous. They know we found something. Donovan's thumb hovered over the keyboard. They had no idea how much he'd found. The acquisition of Titan Manufacturing was textbook on paper. Aging industrial giant, bloated middle management ripe for optimization. But the forensics team had flagged irregularities in Q4 logistics. Shell companies, inventory shuffles between warehouses in New Jersey and Leeds that made no operational sense. Someone was skimming, and Donovan had a strong suspicion who. He typed back, "Let them be nervous, we have the high ground." 8 years ago, he'd pitched EtherLogic to 4 different venture capital firms in Chicago, 4 polished conference rooms, 4 sets of partners in Brioni suits who looked at his hoodie and Nikes like he'd wandered in from the street. The rejections came in variations of the same theme. You don't look like a tech founder. We need someone with traditional leadership presence. Have you considered bringing on a co-founder with more conventional presentation? Translation: they wanted a white guy in a suit. Donovan had raised the seed capital from his own savings, maxing out 3 credit cards and selling his car. He built the first version of EtherLogic's acquisition algorithm in his garage apartment, coding 18-hour days fueled by cheap coffee and a rage so pure it crystallized into focus. 2 years later, he took the company public at a $400 million valuation. 4 years after that, $2.1 billion. Those same VCs sent congratulatory emails now, fishing for deals. He deleted them without reading. The lesson stuck. The world would always underestimate him. Let them. A lounge attendant approached, her name tag reading Melissa. She held out a fresh boarding pass with both hands, like a sacred offering. Her eyes flicked to his face with recognition. Not celebrity worship, but the careful respect reserved for people who appeared on internal VIP manifests. "Mr. Kane, we managed to get you on flight 237. It's the last departure to Heathrow tonight before they shut down the runway. Seat 2A, first class. The captain wants to beat the storm, so boarding starts in 7 minutes." Donovan took the pass, noting the tremor in her fingers. The airport was a pressure cooker tonight. Thousands of travelers stranded, every departing flight a lifeboat. Gate agents were getting screamed at, flight attendants bracing for confrontation, and the weight of ruined holidays pressed down on everyone like the low-hanging clouds outside. "Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate you making this work." Her shoulders dropped half an inch. People didn't thank her enough. He could see it in the way surprise flickered across her face before the professional smile returned. "Happy New Year, Mr. Kane. Safe travels." He grabbed his leather weekender, a battered vintage piece that had logged more miles than most commercial pilots, and headed into the terminal chaos. The main concourse was a disaster movie in slow motion. Families camped on the floor with blankets and pillows scavenged from Hudson News. Children wailed. A man in a business suit screamed into his phone about missing his daughter's wedding. Near Gate B18, a woman sat alone against a pillar, crying scently into her hands. Donovan moved through it all with noise-canceling headphones drowning the cacophony, his expression neutral. He'd learned to compartmentalize suffering, not because he didn't care, but because caring about everything meant fixing nothing. Choose your battles. Win the ones that matter. Gate B32 was already boarding when he arrived. The agent scanned his pass without looking up, the machine emitting a cheerful beep that felt obscene given the stress radiating off everyone in line. Donovan stepped onto the jet bridge, cold air whipping through the gap where the accordion connector didn't quite seal. His ankles stung. He was tired. Bone-tired, the kind that came from 6 months of due diligence, contract negotiations, and corporate warfare disguised as polite emails. He just wanted to sit in 2A, drink a glass of champagne he wouldn't finish, and sleep until Heathrow. The aircraft door yawned open. Warm air hit him first, smelling of leather and industrial sanitizer. He turned left into first class and stopped. Someone was already in 2A. The man looked late 40s with slicked back blonde hair shellacked into submission by what had to be half a can of product. Navy Brioni suit that screamed mid-level executive trying to look like a CEO. Pocket square matched his tie in a coordination so deliberate it tipped into try-hard territory. He had his shoes off, black Ferragamos kicked under the seat, and his sock-clad feet rested on the bulkhead wall. A mimosa sat in his hand, already half empty. His tablet balanced on the tray table as he typed with the aggressive thumb jabs of someone who thought every email was urgent. Donovan checked his boarding pass again. 2A Donovan Kane. He took a breath, adjusted his grip on the weekender, and stepped forward. "Excuse me." The man didn't look up. He held up one finger, an imperious silencing gesture, while he finished typing. 5 seconds passed. 10. 15. The finger stayed raised like a flesh and blood do not disturb sign. Finally, the man hit send with a theatrical flourish and deigned to glance at Donovan. His eyes swept from the hoodie to the joggers to the battered bag, and something ugly curled his lip. Not quite a sneer. Close enough. "Can I help you?" Donovan kept his voice low, polite. "I think you're in my seat. I'm in 2A. The man laughed. Sharp barking sound, no humor in it. "Buddy, you must be confused. This is first class. Economy boarding is that way." He pointed a manicured finger toward the curtain separating the cabins. "Go find row 38 before the overhead bins fill up." Donovan didn't move. His expression stayed neutral, but his eyes hardened in a way that made the temperature drop 2 degrees. "I know where economy is. My ticket says 2A. Please check your boarding pass." The man sighed. A loud, theatrical exhalation designed to signal to everyone nearby that he was being harassed by an idiot. He set his mimosa down with exaggerated care. "Look, pal, I upgraded. I'm a platinum medallion member. I've been flying this route since you were learning to tie your shoes. I'm sitting here now. Run along. I have work to do." He turned back to his tablet, dismissing Donovan like a servant who'd overstayed his purpose. Across the aisle in seat 2B, an older gentleman with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses lowered his Wall Street Journal. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at Donovan, recognition dawning like sunrise. "Harrison Caldwell, 63 years old, outgoing CEO of Titan Manufacturing. The man Donovan was flying to London to replace. The acquisition paperwork had crossed both their desks this morning. Harrison opened his mouth, the beginning of a greeting forming. Donovan gave him the slightest shake of his head. Not yet. Let this play out. Harrison, a man who'd spent 4 decades reading boardroom dynamics, understood immediately. He closed his mouth and settled back into his seat, a small, curious smile playing at his lips. This was going to be interesting. Donovan pressed the call button overhead. A soft chime echoed through the cabin. "Sir," Donovan said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming firmer. "I'm not going to ask you again. You are in my seat." The man slammed his tablet down on the tray table hard enough to rattle the mimosa glass. He stood up, using his full height, 6'1", an inch taller than Donovan, trying to loom, to intimidate. "Are you deaf, or do you just not understand English? Do you know who I am?" "No," Donovan said calmly. "And I don't care. I know who I am, and I know that's my seat. I am Derek Vanderbilt, Senior Vice President of Sales for Titan Manufacturing. I am on my way to London to save a multi-million-dollar account. My time is worth $5,000 an hour. Your time is worth whatever minimum wage is these days." Derek Vanderbilt. The name clicked. Donovan had seen it on the HR roster he'd been reviewing all week. Flagged for excessive expense account irregularities, toxic management style, multiple complaints buried by regional supervisors. Donovan had made a mental note to audit Derek's department first thing in January. And here he was. "Derek," Donovan said, tasting the name. "Well, Derek, unless you bought the airline, that ticket doesn't belong to you." A flight attendant rushed over. Her name tag said Lauren Hayes, and stress etched lines around her eyes that hadn't been there at the start of her shift. She was young, maybe 28, and the pilot had already announced door closure. If they delayed now, they'd miss the takeoff window. 300 people would be stranded. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" "Yes," Derek barked, pointing at Donovan's chest like he was identifying a suspect in a lineup. "This individual is harassing me. He's trying to hustle a seat he didn't pay for. Get him out of here so I can work." Lauren looked at Donovan, then at the boarding pass in his hand. She took it gently, scanned it with her handheld device. The machine beeped green. She turned to Derek. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Derek rolled his eyes so hard his whole head moved. "I don't need to show you my pass. I told you I'm a platinum member. The gate agent waved me through. Sir, I need to see the pass." Lauren's voice, strained with patience, stretched to its breaking point. Derek huffed, dug into his jacket pocket and produced a crumpled boarding pass. He shoved it at her. Lauren scanned it. The machine emitted a low, unhappy buzz. The cabin went silent. Several passengers in rows 3 and 4 stopped pretending to mind their business and openly stared. Harrison Caldwell in 2B lowered his newspaper completely, watching Derek with the intensity of a hawk spotting a field mouse. "Sir," Lauren said, her posture straightening as professional authority kicked in, "this boarding pass is for seat 17C. That's in premium economy. It is not in first class." The words landed like a gavel. Derek's face turned a violent shade of red, the color climbing from his collar to his hairline in under 3 seconds. But instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging the objective reality of the printed seat assignment, he doubled down. "That's a computer error. The agent at the desk upgraded me verbally," she said. "Mr. Vanderbilt, thank you for your loyalty. Please take 2A. If your system hasn't updated, that's your incompetence, not my problem." "Sir, verbal upgrades aren't policy," Lauren said, "and Mr. Kane here has a paid ticket for this seat. I'm going to have to ask you to move to your assigned seat in 17C. Derek laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that scraped against the cabin's tense silence. He looked Donovan up and down again, slower this time, making sure everyone saw the performance. "You want me to move for him? Look at him. He looks like he's here to rob the plane, not fly on it. How did he even afford this ticket? Drug money, rapper royalties? The racism hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Donovan's hands balled into fists inside his hoodie pockets. 8 years of meditation practice, of learning to transmute rage into focus, kept his face neutral. But his jaw clenched. A muscle jumped in his cheek. He looked across the aisle at Harrison Caldwell. Harrison looked furious now, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrest. The older man leaned forward, ready to intervene. Donovan caught his eye again. "Wait, Mr. Vanderbilt," Donovan said softly, each word deliberate. "You're making a mistake, a very expensive mistake. The only mistake is the airline letting people like you up front." Derek spat. He turned to Lauren, voice rising. "I am not moving. I have a bad back. I need the legroom for medical reasons. If you try to move me, I will sue this airline into the ground. I know the VP of operations at Delta personally." "Do you want to lose your job, sweetheart?" Lauren flinched. The threat landed. She was young, and name-dropping worked on the young. The lawsuit angle clearly rattled her. The plane was already delayed. If they had to call security to drag Derek off, they would miss the takeoff window entirely. The flight would be canceled, everyone on board stranded in New York for New Year's. Donovan saw the panic in Lauren's eyes. He saw the pilot looking out from the cockpit, checking his watch. He realized that if he pushed this, 300 people would pay the price. Leadership meant taking the hit for the greater good. "Lauren," Donovan said, his voice cutting through the tension like a clean blade. "It's okay." "Mr. Kane, it's not okay," Lauren said, tears pricking her eyes. "It's your seat. The flight needs to leave. If we argue, nobody flies. Does 17C have a window? Yes, but I'll take it." Derek let out a triumphant whoop. "See? Even he knows he doesn't belong here. Smart move, kid. Go sit where you fit in." Donovan leaned in close, not threatening, just close enough to invade Derek's personal space, to make the man flinch despite his bravado. "Enjoy the seat, Derek. It's the most comfortable you're going to be for a very long time." He turned to Harrison Caldwell in 2B. "Sorry for the disturbance, sir. Have a pleasant flight." Harrison nodded slowly, a look of profound respect and anticipation in his eyes. "You too, young man. I have a feeling things will work out." Donovan threw his weekender over his shoulder and walked back toward economy. As he passed through the curtain, he heard Derek loudly calling for Lauren. "Hey, sweetheart, another mimosa, and bring some nuts, the warm ones. I'm celebrating a victory." Seat 17C was everything Donovan expected. Tight, cramped, smelling faintly of baby wipes and recycled air. He folded his 6'2" frame into the space, his knees immediately pressing against the hard plastic shell of seat 16C. The teenager in 16C had already reclined fully, headphones blasting trap music loud enough that tinny rhythms leaked into the cabin. A mother with a crying infant sat across the aisle. Behind him, someone was already snoring. Donovan pulled out his phone before switching it to airplane mode. He opened his encrypted messaging app and composed a text to Natasha Bellamy in London. "Draft termination papers for Derek Vanderbilt, VP Sales at Titan, effective immediately upon my arrival. Also find out who our contact is at Delta Corporate. I want the passenger manifest for Flight 237 saved. Everything." He hit send. Then he opened a second message, this one to his mentor, Dr. Imani Okoye. She'd been his professor at Northwestern, the first person who saw past the hoodie to the mind underneath. When 4 VCs rejected him, she was the one who said, "Good, let them regret it later." "You were right. The world tested me tonight." Her response came back in seconds. "And?" "I passed. Barely. Marcus Aurelius said the impediment to action advance as action. What was in the way becomes the way. I know, still hurts. It should. Pain means you're still human. But don't let it make you cruel. Accountability, not revenge." Donovan stared at those last two words. Accountability, not revenge. The line felt thin sometimes. I'll try. You'll succeed, you always do. Call me when you land. He switched the phone to airplane mode and leaned his head back against the seat. The plane jolted as it began its pushback. Through the oval window, he could see the blizzard intensifying, snow whipping horizontal across the tarmac. Up in first class, Derek Vanderbilt stretched his legs out in 2A, clinking his mimosa glass against the window, thinking he was the king of the world. He had no idea that the man he'd just banished to row 17 owned the very chair he was sitting in. 2 hours into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed to a soft, sleep-inducing blue. Outside, the blizzard had been left behind. Somewhere over the dark Atlantic, replaced by the endless star-pricked void of night at 39,000 feet. The hum of the engine settled into a hypnotic drone, lulling most passengers into uneasy sleep. Donovan Kane was not sleeping, his knees pressed against seat 16C. With the kind of constant low-grade discomfort that ground you down over hours. The teenager in front of him had reclined so far back that Donovan's laptop balanced precariously on his tray table, the screen nearly touching his chest. He was reviewing Titan Manufacturing's financials one last time, and the numbers weren't adding up. He highlighted a column on the spreadsheet, Q4 logistics and distribution costs. There was a variance of nearly $2.8 million categorized under external consulting services. In the corporate world, external consulting was code for one of two things: bribes or embezzlement, sometimes both. Donovan frowned, rubbing his temples. He needed to speak with the head of sales and the CFO immediately upon landing. He pulled up the organizational chart. The sales division was a tangled hierarchy, but at the top, in bold, Derek Vanderbilt, VP of Sales. Of course. Donovan closed his eyes. The irony was almost too perfect. The man responsible for this suspicious variance was currently 200 feet away, drinking champagne in Donovan's seat, convinced he'd won something. He opened a new encrypted file and started a memo to himself. Audit priorities post-acquisition 1, sales division expense accounts 2, logistics routing between NJ/Leeds facilities 3, all external consultant contracts 2022 to 2024 4. Cross-reference with Vanderbilt's approval signatures. The plane shuddered slightly. Not turbulence, just the normal flex and sway of a 777 riding jet streams. But it was enough to remind Donovan where he was, trapped in a metal tube 7 miles above the ocean, surrounded by strangers, trying to work while his body screamed for sleep. He saved the document and closed the laptop. No point torturing himself with projections when he couldn't act on them until touchdown. He needed rest. The meeting with Titan's board was in 36 hours, and he had to be sharp. But sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying the confrontation, Derek's laugh, the casual cruelty of people like you, Lauren's fear, Harrison Caldwell's restrained fury, and his own choice to walk away. Had it been leadership or cowardice? The question gnawed at him. His phone, still in airplane mode, showed a downloaded podcast queue. He selected one at random, an interview with a former Navy SEAL about decision-making under pressure. The guy's voice was gravel and whiskey, talking about the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is what your lizard brain does when threatened. Response is what your trained brain does when you've practiced the scenario 1,000 times. The gap between the two is called discipline. Donovan let the words wash over him. He'd responded, not reacted. That was something. The cabin jolted suddenly, a sharp drop that lifted Donovan's stomach into his throat. The seatbelt sign dinged on with an aggressive chime that cut through the sleeping quiet like an alarm. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, tense in a way that made Donovan's pulse spike. "Folks, this is Captain Whitmore. We're hitting a patch of rough air. Unexpected clear air turbulence over the North Atlantic. I need everyone seated with seatbelts fastened immediately." Flight attendants, take your jump seats now. This is going to be bumpy. Donovan's hands moved automatically, checking his seatbelt, tightening it across his lap. Around him, passengers jolted awake. The mother across the aisle clutched her infant tighter. The teenager in 16C yanked his seat upright so fast the mechanism squealed. The plane didn't just shake. It fell. Not a gentle dip. A plummet. 400 feet in 3 seconds, gravity ceasing to exist as Donovan's body lifted against the seatbelt, stomach lurching into his chest. Screams tore through the cabin. Primal, terrified sounds that bypassed all social filters. In the galley, a coffee pot flew upward and smashed against the ceiling, raining hot liquid down in a scalding shower. The plane bucked sideways, banking hard left. Donovan's head slammed against the window, stars exploding across his vision. The teenager in 16C vomited into the seat pocket. The infant's screams reached a pitch that felt like it could shatter the windows. And then, as suddenly as it started, the plane stabilized. Not smooth, it was still shaking like a car on a gravel road, but no longer falling. The seatbelt sign stayed on. The cabin lights flickered. Donovan's heart hammered against his ribs. His breath came fast and shallow. He forced himself to slow it down. 4 counts in, hold, 6 counts out. Panic was a choice. He chose not to make it. But up in first class, something worse than turbulence was unfolding. Through the gap in the curtain, Donovan could hear chaos. A man screaming. A woman's voice, urgent and commanding. The thud of someone hitting the floor. Every instinct told him to stay seated. The seatbelt sign was on. Moving during turbulence violated FAA regulations and basic survival instinct. But that scream wasn't fear. It was pain. Donovan unbuckled. The plane lurched again as he stood, and he grabbed the seatbacks to steady himself. The mother across the aisle looked at him like he was insane. Maybe he was. But 8 years ago, before Ether Logic, before the board meetings and the acquisitions, Donovan had spent 2 summers leading rock climbing expeditions in the Tetons. He'd earned his wilderness first responder certification because when you're 3 pitches up a granite face and someone breaks an ankle, you don't have the luxury of waiting for help. He moved up the aisle, hand over hand, bracing against the seats as the plane shuddered. A flight attendant, not Lauren, someone else, shouted at him from her jump seat. "Sir, sit down, the captain ordered." "Medical emergency," Donovan said, not stopping. He pushed through the curtain into first class. The scene was chaos compressed into 12 rows. The smell hit him first, scotch and blood, acrid and copper. Derek Vanderbilt was in seat 2A, blood streaming from his nose, clutching his face with both hands. His expensive suit was soaked, amber liquid and crimson mixing into a grotesque tie-dye. Shattered glass glittered on the seat and floor. But Derek was conscious, loud, and obnoxious. Not the emergency. The emergency was in 2B. Harrison Caldwell slumped against the window, his face ashen gray, lips tinged blue. His left hand clutched his chest. His breathing came in ragged, desperate gasps. The sound of a man drowning on dry land. His wire-rimmed glasses sat askew on his face, one lens cracked. Donovan dropped to his knees beside Harrison's seat, ignoring Derek's wailing completely. "Sir, can you hear me? Harrison, stay with me." Harrison's eyes rolled toward Donovan, recognition flickering through the pain. He tried to speak, but only a wheeze came out. Donovan pressed 2 fingers to Harrison's wrist, pulse thready and weak, racing too fast. Classic signs of cardiac event. He looked up, scanning for Lauren or any flight attendant. "I need his medication. Check his bag, nitroglycerin, aspirin, anything." Derek's voice cut through, shrill and indignant. "What about me? I'm bleeding. This is Italian silk. Who's going to pay for this?" Donovan's head turned slowly. The look he gave Derek was not anger, it was something colder. Pure calculation, the gaze of a man cataloging evidence for later use. "Shut up!" The command was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Derek's mouth snapped closed. Lauren appeared, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. She saw Harrison and understood immediately. She dropped to her knees beside Donovan, fumbling through Harrison's carry-on bag with shaking hands. "Here," she gasped, pulling out a small brown prescription bottle. "Nitroglycerin tablets." Donovan took it, checked the label, prescribed to Harrison Caldwell, current date, dosage correct. He twisted the cap off and shook one tiny white pill into his palm. "Harrison, open your mouth, under your tongue." Harrison's jaw trembled, but he obeyed. Donovan placed the tablet carefully, watching as it began to dissolve. "Breathe slowly. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're going to be okay." The plane bucked again, harder this time, a violent shudder that threw Donovan against the armrest. Pain lanced through his ribs, but he wrapped one arm around Harrison's shoulders, using his body as a brace to keep the older man from being thrown from the seat. His other hand gripped the seat back, knuckles white, legs wedged against the bulkhead. He became a human shield, absorbing the case while Harrison's heart fought to keep beating. Lauren scrambled for the oxygen tank stored in the forward galley, dragging it back with both hands. Together, she and Donovan fitted the mask over Harrison's face. The hiss of pressurized oxygen filled the small space. 10 minutes. That's how long the turbulence lasted, though it felt like an hour. 10 minutes of Donovan bracing Harrison while the plane fought the sky, monitoring the older man's pulse, watching color slowly, agonizingly slowly, return to his cheeks. The nitroglycerin was working. The angina attack was subsiding. When the plane finally smoothed out and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Harrison opened his eyes. They were clearer now, focused. He looked up at Donovan with something like wonder. "You," Harrison whispered through the oxygen mask. "You're the man from the lounge. I've got you, Mr. Caldwell. You're safe. You know my name. I know a lot of things. Just rest." By the time the cabin stabilized and passengers began moving again, Harrison was sitting upright, sipping water, the oxygen mask set aside. He was weak but out of immediate danger. He refused Lauren's suggestion to divert to a closer airport. "I'll see a doctor in London. I have medication. I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. He was shaken, and Donovan could see it in the tremor of his hands, the pallor that lingered despite the returned circulation. Harrison looked at Donovan with new eyes. Gratitude, yes, but also calculation. He was a CEO, even in crisis. He was putting pieces together. "You gave up your seat," Harrison said quietly so only Donovan could hear. "For the flight, so we wouldn't be delayed. 300 people needed to get somewhere, and then you saved my life. Anyone with first aid training would have done the same." Harrison's lips quirked. "No, not anyone. Most people would have frozen, or filmed it for social media." His eyes flicked to Derek, who was now cleaned up but sulking in 2A, holding a cold compress to his nose. "Some would have complained about their suit." Donovan said nothing. Harrison made a decision. He called Lauren over. "Is the jump seat still open?" "Yes, Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Kane sits here with me. I need him nearby in case it happens again." Lauren looked at Donovan. "Mr. Kane, would you—" "Of course." Derek's head snapped up from his compress. "Great. Now we have coach passengers squatting in first class. Isn't that against FAA regulations?" Harrison turned to Derek with a look that could freeze lava. It was the first real flash of anger Donovan had seen from the older man, and it was devastating in its cold precision. "He saved my life while you were crying about dry cleaning." "Shut your mouth, Vanderbilt." Derek went white, not from fear, from recognition. He knew who Harrison Caldwell was. Everyone at Titan did. Donovan took the jump seat across from them, facing backward. It meant staring directly at Derek and Harrison for the remainder of the flight. The dynamic had shifted. This was no longer a passenger cabin. It was a boardroom, and the battle lines were being drawn. Harrison took a deep breath, his color better but still fragile. He looked at Donovan, then at Derek, then back to Donovan. A decision crystallized behind his eyes. He couldn't wait for London. He wanted to see the look on Derek's face right now. "Mr. Kane," Harrison said formally, his CEO voice returning, "I apologize for the introduction under these circumstances. I assume you were traveling to London for the transition meeting." Donovan nodded, his expression unreadable. I am." Derek looked up, confused. "Transition meeting? What are you talking about? He's probably going to London to wash dishes." Harrison ignored him completely. He reached into his briefcase, the same one that held the nitroglycerin, and pulled out a thick blue folder, stamped on the front in silver foil. "Confidential. Ether Logic and Titan Manufacturing Merger and Acquisition Strategy." Derek's eyes locked onto the folder. He froze, mimosa halfway to his lips. Harrison handed the folder to Donovan. "I was reviewing the personnel files for the restructuring. I've been struggling with the decision regarding sales leadership retention." Donovan took the folder. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He looked directly at Derek. "I've reviewed the Q4 numbers, Harrison. The variances are troubling, and frankly, the culture seems toxic." Derek set his drink down. The color drained from his face faster than it had during the turbulence. "Wait a minute. How do you know about Q4 variances? Who are you?" Donovan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, closing the distance between them. "You asked me earlier if I knew who you were." His voice was quiet, each word a surgical cut. "You're Derek Vanderbilt, Senior VP of Sales, and in about 6 hours when we land, you're going to wish you'd never heard my name." The plane hummed around them. The stars wheeled outside the windows, and in the confined space of first class, the future began to take shape. Derek's hand trembled as he set down his glass, ice cubes clinking against crystal like tiny bells tolling his professional funeral. His eyes darted between Donovan and Harrison, searching for the punchline, the moment when they'd reveal this was some elaborate prank. But Harrison's face held only grim satisfaction, and Donovan's expression remained as unreadable as carved stone. "I don't understand," Derek managed, his voice cracking on the last syllable. "What transition meeting? Harrison, what's he talking about?" Harrison Caldwell adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, the gesture of a professor about to deliver a failing grade. "Derek, when was the last time you actually read the company-wide emails? The ones that weren't about your sales numbers? I read everything important, then you missed the announcement 3 weeks ago. Titan Manufacturing accepted a buyout offer from Ether Logic. The deal closed this morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. As of 6 hours ago, Ether Logic owns 51% controlling interest in Titan." The words landed like depth charges, each one detonating deeper than the last. Derek's mouth opened and closed, a fish suddenly aware it had been pulled from water. That's impossible. We're not for sale. You wouldn't sell without telling senior leadership." "I told the board. They voted unanimously to accept." Harrison's voice carried the finality of a sealed tomb. "You're not senior leadership, Derek. You're middle management with a VP title." Donovan watched Derek process the information, watched the man's brain scramble to recalibrate his understanding of reality. It was like watching someone realize mid-step that the ground had vanished beneath them. "Okay, fine," Derek said, rallying with the desperate optimism of a man clinging to driftwood. "So we got bought out. That happens, but what does this guy have to do with anything? He's a passenger. He's nobody." Harrison turned to Donovan with something close to theatrical anticipation. "Mr. Kane, would you like to clarify your role, or shall I?" Donovan reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a business card. Simple design, white cardstock, black lettering, no logos, just text. Donovan Kane, founder and CEO, Ether Logic. He placed it on Derek's tray table. Derek stared at it, picked it up, read it 3 times like the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. His breathing became audible, short, shallow gasps. No, that's... You were in coach. I took your seat. You were wearing a hoodie." And you made assumptions based on fabric, Donovan replied, his tone carrying no heat, just observation. Fatal ones. Derek's face cycled through emotions too quickly to catalog. Denial, confusion, fear, anger back to fear. Sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the cabin's cool air. Mr. Kane, Donovan, sir, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. The stress of the flight, the turbulence, I wasn't thinking clearly. I had a few drinks and you know how it is with altitude. Alcohol hits differently. We can work this out. I'm the best sales VP you'll ever find. I know the European market inside out. You need me. Donovan leaned back in the jump seat, the overhead light casting his features in sharp relief. Tell me, Derek, how exactly do you know the European market? Derek seized the lifeline, words tumbling out in a rush. I've cultivated relationships with every major buyer from Paris to Prague. I know which procurement officers take coffee at 10 versus noon. I know their kids' names, their anniversary dates. I wine and dine them at Michelin restaurants, send gifts at Christmas, sponsor their golf tournaments. That's how deals get done. Personal touch. Old school. These tech guys, he caught himself, course-corrected. I mean, these younger executives, they think everything happens on spreadsheets, but business is relationships. Interesting. Donovan pulled out his phone, swiped through files. Those Michelin dinners, do you categorize them as external consulting services in your expense reports? Derek went very still. What? Q4 alone shows $2.8 million in external consulting. But when I cross-reference with your meeting calendar, there are no consultant names, no deliverables, no contracts, just a lot of dinners at restaurants that don't issue itemized receipts. The blood drained from Derek's face so quickly Donovan wondered if he might pass out. Lauren appeared at the galley entrance, concerned, but Donovan waved her off. This wasn't a medical emergency. This was surgery. Those are legitimate business expenses, Derek stammered. I can explain every dollar. Can you explain the shell company registered in the Cayman Islands under the name GVB Holdings? The one that received wire transfers totaling $2 million from Titan's logistics budget between May and November? Harrison's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Even he hadn't known about this part. He pulled out his leather-bound notebook and began writing. Derek's hands were shaking now, mimosa sloshing over the rim of his glass. You're making accusations based on incomplete data. You don't understand the complexity of international supply chain. I understand embezzlement. Donovan's voice could have frosted windows. I understand shell companies created to siphon corporate funds. I understand executives who think they're smarter than forensic accountants. I haven't embezzled anything. Then explain the inventory transfers. You've been shuffling product between the New Jersey warehouse and the Leeds depot every quarter. No operational reason, no efficiency gain, just moving numbers on paper to mask the shortfalls from your phantom consulting fees. Derek shot to his feet, the sudden movement making the plane's gentle sway feel like an earthquake. Passengers in the rows behind turned to stare. This was no longer a private conversation. This is harassment. You're accusing me of crimes without evidence, without due process. I have rights. I have a contract with severance clauses and... You had rights, Harrison interjected, his voice cutting through Derek's panic like a scalpel. Until you admitted to federal financial crimes in front of 2 witnesses at 39,000 feet. Gross misconduct clause, Derek. Paragraph 7, subsection C of your employment contract. No golden parachute, no severance package, and definitely no Cayman Islands retirement fund. Derek looked around the cabin desperately, searching for allies. For anyone who might validate his version of reality. The other first-class passengers avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by their phones and magazines. Even the couple in row 4, who'd been filming earlier, had stopped, sensing this was beyond entertainment into something darker. There's more, Donovan continued, his calm more terrifying than any shouting could be. Want to talk about the Malta account? The $800,000 that disappeared into supplier invoices for materials that were never delivered? Derek collapsed back into his seat like a marionette with cut strings. How do you know about Malta? Because unlike you, I actually read financial reports. And unlike your previous oversight, I have a team of forensic accountants who enjoy puzzles. They found all of it, Derek. The shell companies, the fake invoices, the inventory shuffles. They found the yacht rental you expense as client development. The timeshare in Barbados listed as conference venue. The Tesla you bought through the company vehicle program but registered to your girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, Derek whispered, then seemed to realize that was possibly the least important correction he could make. Harrison was writing furiously now, pages filling with evidence, dates, amounts. His earlier cardiac event seemed forgotten, replaced by the energizing fury of a CEO discovering just how badly he'd been robbed under his own watch. 2 ex-wives, Derek said suddenly, desperately, like this explained anything. Alimony payments that would bankrupt a small country, my daughters at Yale. Do you know what that costs? I was desperate. I made mistakes, but I was going to pay it back. The Cayman account, that was just temporary. A loan I was making to myself until bonus season. A loan. Donovan's laugh was bitter and brief. You stole from 1,400 factory workers who depend on this company for their pensions, their health care, their children's futures. You chose your comfort over their security, and you call it a loan. I don't even have a yacht. That Instagram photo, that was a rental for one weekend. I know. The forensics team traced the payment. You expensed it as team building in the Bahamas, but your entire sales team was in Munich that week for the trade show. Derek put his head in his hands. His fingers threaded through his gelled hair, disrupting the careful styling, making him look suddenly older, smaller. What do you want from me? Confession? Apology? I'll pay it back. All of it. Just don't. Don't what? Don't destroy your career? Don't report you to the SEC? Don't press charges? Donovan's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing Derek to lean in to hear. You destroyed your career the moment you decided my hoodie meant I didn't deserve basic human respect. Everything after that is just documentation. The words hung in the recycled air of the cabin, heavy with consequence. Derek tried one more angle, the last arrow in a nearly empty quiver. You can't fire me mid-flight. There are procedures, HR protocols. I have 30 days' notice written into my contract. Boy, watch me. Donovan pulled his laptop from his bag, opened it on his knees. The screen's glow lit his face from below, casting shadows that made him look almost demonic. He typed rapidly, fingers flying across keys. What are you doing? Sending an email to Natasha Bellamy, my chief legal officer in London. She's drafting your termination letter right now. For cause. Effective upon landing. You can't. I can. I own 51% of your company. I sit on Delta's parent board with 11% equity stake. And in about 6 minutes, I'm going to make a phone call that will ensure you don't just lose your job, you'll lose everything. Derek lunged forward, hands reaching for the laptop like he could somehow delete the email, undo the last hour, rewind time to before he stole a seat from a man in a hoodie. Harrison moved faster than someone who'd just survived a cardiac event should be able to move, blocking Derek with a surprisingly strong arm. Sit down. Derek sat, but his eyes had taken on a wild quality, the look of a cornered animal realizing all exits were sealed. There has to be a way out of this. Money? I'll give you everything in the Cayman account. 3 million, it's all yours, just let me resign quietly. Say I wanted to pursue other opportunities. I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again. 3 million? Donovan looked up from his laptop. The forensic audit found 2 million in the Caymans. Where's the other million, Derek? The question was a trap, and Derek walked right into it. I diversified, multiple accounts, different jurisdictions. I'm not an idiot. You just confessed to an additional million in hidden assets in front of witnesses. Donovan glanced at Harrison, who was still writing. Thank you for that. Derek's face crumpled. Actual tears began streaming down his cheeks, cutting trails through the dried blood from his earlier nosebleed. Please, I have children. My daughter, she'll see this. Everyone will know. The internet, it never forgets. My life will be over. Your daughter will learn that actions have consequences. Maybe that's a more valuable lesson than Yale can teach. Donovan closed the laptop with a decisive click. As for the internet never forgetting, you should have thought about that before you publicly humiliated me based on my skin color. Before you let a man die because you were worried about your suit. Every camera in this cabin caught that, Derek. You went viral hours ago. What? Harrison pulled out his phone, turned it toward Derek. The screen showed a live stream from someone in row 7. A tech blogger named Jade Moretti with 40,000 followers that had apparently ballooned to 300,000 in the last 2 hours. The stream was titled, "Racist Exec Caught on Camera. You Won't Believe What Happens Next." The view count ticked upward in real time. 1.2 million, 1.3 million, 1.4 million. Derek made a sound that wasn't quite a word, more like air being forcibly expelled from a punctured tire. Comment section is particularly illuminating, Harrison noted, scrolling. 12,000 people have already identified you by name. Your LinkedIn profile has been archived. Someone found your daughter's Instagram. I'd tell her to set it to private, but it's probably too late for that. My daughter. Derek's voice broke completely. She's 18. She didn't do anything wrong. Neither did the 1,400 workers whose pensions you risked. Donovan's tone held no satisfaction, just fact. Consequences ripple, Derek. You taught me that tonight. Now you get to learn it. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, professional and steady. Folks, we're beginning our initial descent into London Heathrow. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing. Local time is 5:45 a.m., and the weather is cold and clear. We'd like to thank you for flying with us tonight, and we wish everyone a Happy New Year. Happy New Year. The phrase felt like a punchline to a joke Derek was only now understanding. Donovan pulled out his phone, switched it off airplane mode. The device immediately began buzzing, notifications flooding in from messages sent while they were over the Atlantic. He scrolled through them, Natasha confirming the termination papers were ready, his PR director flagging the viral video, 3 missed calls from Dr. Imani Okoye, and 1 text from her that simply read, "I saw. Call me the second you land. Proud of you, but we need to talk about what comes next." He drafted a response to Natasha. Add 1 million to the forensic audit, multiple offshore accounts. He just confessed. Also contact Delta Security at Heathrow. I want officers waiting at the gate. Derek watched him type, watched the final nails being driven into the coffin of his career. Security? You're having me arrested for what? This is all civil. Corporate malfeasance, sure, but not criminal. Wire fraud across international borders is a federal crime. Harrison corrected, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd sat through enough legal briefings to know. Embezzlement over 250,000 triggers felony charges. And when you factor in the Malta account, the fake invoices, the shell companies, Derek, you're looking at money laundering charges. That's serious fraud office territory. But I'm American. Committing crimes against a company with UK operations using UK financial institutions to process your fraudulent transfers. The SFO has jurisdiction, and trust me, they don't play games. The plane's descent steepened, ears popping as pressure shifted. Through the window, the first hints of dawn were breaking over the Atlantic, a thin line of gold on the eastern horizon burning away the stars. Derek tried one final time, his voice barely above a whisper. Donovan, Mr. Kane, can I call you that? We're not that different, you and I. We both came from nothing, fought our way up, made hard choices to survive. You understand what it's like to be underestimated, to have to prove yourself twice as hard because of who you are. I made mistakes, yes, but I was trying to build something, trying to give my kids a better life than I had. Isn't that what you're doing? Building ether logic, fighting against all the people who said you couldn't. We're the same. Donovan looked at him for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried the weight of absolute conviction. "We are nothing alike. I built my company with code and sweat and sleepless nights. You built yours on theft and lies. I was underestimated because of racism. You're being held accountable because of crime. And the biggest difference, Derek, when I was in that Sky Club lounge wearing this same hoodie, the staff treated me with respect because they recognized competence regardless of packaging. You saw the same hoodie and assumed criminality. That's not survival. That's bigotry. And it cost you everything." The finality in those words was absolute. Derek seemed to shrink physically, collapsing inward like a dying star. The plane touched down with a screech of rubber on tarmac, the reverse thrusters roaring as they bled speed. The cabin erupted in scattered applause, the reflexive celebration of survival that always felt slightly morbid to Donovan. They'd survived, yes, but some of them didn't know yet that their lives had fundamentally changed in the last 7 hours. As the aircraft taxied toward the gate, Donovan could see blue lights flashing on the tarmac through the window. 3 police vehicles, Metropolitan Police markings visible even in the pre-dawn darkness, and 2 black sedans, the kind that carried serious people with serious authority. Derek saw them too. His breathing quickened, shallow and rapid. "What did you do? What did you tell them?" "The truth, that there's a confessed embezzler on this flight who poses a flight risk. The Serious Fraud Office takes these things seriously, especially when there are offshore accounts involved." The plane came to a stop at Gate 24. The seatbelt sign dinged off, but the pilot's voice immediately came back on. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We've been instructed by ground authorities to hold all disembarkation until further notice. Please keep the aisles clear." Confused murmurs rippled through the cabin. In row 7, Jade Moretti's live stream was capturing everything. Her whispered narration barely audible. "Something's happening, guys. Police lights outside. They're asking everyone to stay seated. This is insane." Derek's hands trembled so badly his phone clattered to the floor. He bent to retrieve it, and Donovan saw the man's screen was open to a banking app, frantically trying to transfer funds, move money, hide evidence even now. "I wouldn't bother," Donovan advised. "My legal team froze all accounts associated with Titan's financial systems about 20 minutes ago. Emergency injunction. You can try to move the money, but it'll just create more documentation of your crimes." The forward cabin door hissed open. Cold London air rushed in, carrying the smell of jet fuel in winter. Heavy footsteps echoed on the jet bridge, multiple people, moving with purpose. 4 figures entered the aircraft, 2 uniformed Metropolitan Police officers with high-visibility vests, and 2 people in dark suits that screamed federal authority. The lead suit was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that could perform audits through sheer force of will. She walked directly to first class, gaze sweeping across the passengers before landing on Derek with the precision of a laser-guided missile. "Derek Vanderbilt?" Derek's voice cracked. "Yes?" "I'm Agent Patricia Wolfe, Serious Fraud Office. This is Agent Chen. We have some questions regarding financial irregularities at Titan Manufacturing. We'd like you to come with us." "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet. But we do need to have a conversation at our offices. You can come voluntarily or we can make it official right here. Your choice." Derek looked at Donovan one last time, a drowning man's appeal for a lifeline that would never come. Donovan met his gaze and said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Derek stood on shaking legs. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right. One will be provided. Please come with us." As the officers escorted Derek down the aisle toward the exit, every passenger watched in silence. Phones were recording, dozens of them, capturing every angle of the walk. Derek kept his head down, trying to hide his face, but it was futile. His humiliation was being documented in 4K resolution, uploaded to servers that would preserve this moment forever. Jade Moretti's live stream viewer count hit 2 million. When Derek reached row 7, he stumbled and one of the officers caught his elbow. The gesture was almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. The professional courtesy extended to someone who'd shown no courtesy to others. They disappeared through the door. The cabin erupted in conversation, speculation, shock. But Donovan tuned it all out. He was watching Harrison, who had gone pale again, hand pressed to his chest. "Are you all right?" Harrison nodded, but the movement was weak. "Just adrenaline crash. I'll be fine." "No, you won't. Not without proper medical attention." Donovan called Lauren over. "When we disembark, I want paramedics standing by for Mr. Caldwell. He had a cardiac event mid-flight. He needs to go directly to hospital." "I have a meeting," Harrison protested. "Your meeting can wait. Your heart can't." Donovan's tone left no room for argument. "I'll handle the board. You handle not dying." Despite everything, Harrison laughed, a weak, raspy sound. "You're good at this. The command thing. You'll do well with Titan." "I learned from the best." Donovan gestured at the older man. "You built that company from 20 employees to 1,400. You treated people with dignity. That's the foundation I'm inheriting. Derek was the rot. We cut out rot." The pilot made another announcement. Boarding could resume. Passengers began gathering their belongings, the normal chaos of deplaning. But Lauren approached Donovan before he could stand. "Mr. Kane, the captain would like a word, and there's someone from Delta Corporate on the jet bridge." Of course there was. The viral video had reached corporate. Damage control was already spinning up. Donovan followed Lauren to the front galley where Captain Bartholomew Whitmore waited, 60-ish, silver hair, the kind of authoritative presence that came from 3 decades of holding people's lives in his hands at altitude. He did not look pleased. "Mr. Kane, I understand there was an incident regarding your seat assignment." "There was. My crew followed protocol. Your crew sided with a passenger based on appearance rather than documentation. Your flight attendant used racially coded language, and you, Captain, never once asked to see my boarding pass before you threatened to have me removed." Whitmore's jaw tightened. "I trust my crew's judgment." "Your crew's judgment almost cost you a passenger's life. When Mr. Caldwell was having a heart attack, Derek Vanderbilt was worried about his suit. Your flight attendant had to make a medical decision while managing a racist passenger. That's a failure of leadership. I run a tight ship. You run a discriminatory ship. And since I sit on the board of Delta's parent company, that's going to change." The color drained from Whitmore's face as the implication landed. He wasn't talking to a disgruntled passenger. He was talking to someone with the power to end careers. "Mr. Kane, if there was any misunderstanding, there was no misunderstanding. There was racism. There was abuse of authority, and there will be consequences." Donovan pulled out his phone, showed Whitmore the email he'd drafted. "This goes to the Delta CEO in 3 hours. It details everything that happened on this flight. The seat discrimination, the threats, the medical emergency, and who responded versus who complained. And it includes my recommendation for immediate investigation into your crew's pattern of behavior." "Pattern? This was one incident." "Was it? How many other passengers has your crew treated this way? How many complaints have been filed and buried?" Donovan's voice was quiet but unyielding. "I'm going to find out. And Captain Whitmore, I'd start polishing my resume." He walked past the captain through the door onto the jet bridge where dawn was breaking over London. The terminal was just waking up. Early flights preparing for departure, cleaning crews moving through empty gates. A woman in a sharp Delta uniform waited at the entrance. Corporate management, the kind sent to contain fires before they became infernos. Her name tag read, Patricia York, Regional Manager. "Mr. Kane, I'm so sorry about your experience tonight. We take these matters extremely seriously, and I want to assure you, save it." Donovan kept walking, forcing her to match his pace. "How many complaints have been filed against Celeste Hargrove in the last 5 years?" Patricia stumbled over her own feet. That's confidential employee information. How many, Ms. York? I'd have to check our records. Donovan stopped, turned to face her fully. You don't have to check. You know the number because you've buried every single one. So let me ask again. How many passengers has Celeste discriminated against? Patricia's professional smile cracked. Mr. Kane, I don't appreciate the accusatory tone. I don't appreciate corporate managers who enable racism to protect their bonus structures. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pull every complaint filed against Flight 237's crew for the last 10 years. You're going to compile them into a report, and you're going to have it on my desk. He pulled out a business card, handed it to her. By end of business London time. Or I go public with what happened tonight and Delta's stock price drops 15% by market close. You can't threaten. I'm not threatening. I'm explaining consequences. You have 8 hours. He walked away, leaving Patricia York standing in the jet bridge, her corporate armor showing cracks. The terminal proper was a different world, warm, bright, starting to fill with early travelers. Donovan's phone buzzed continuously now that it had full signal. He found a quiet corner near a closed bookshop and called Natasha. She answered on the first ring. Please tell me you didn't just get someone arrested at 30,000 feet. Technically, it was on the ground. Donovan. He confessed, Natasha. Multiple offshore accounts, shell companies, fake invoices. He handed me everything on a silver platter because he was too drunk and arrogant to realize who I was. The SFO has him? As of 5 minutes ago. Good, but we have a problem. The video is everywhere. CNN, BBC, social media. Your face is all over it. The hoodie, the seat confrontation, the whole thing. Your identity as EtherLogic's CEO is public now. Everyone knows. Donovan closed his eyes. He'd known this was coming, but the reality still hit like a gut punch. Privacy was a luxury he'd just spent. How bad? Stock price is up 7%. People love an underdog CEO story, but we're getting death threats too. The usual racist cesspool claiming you're playing the victim, that you staged it for publicity. Security wants to increase your protection detail. No. Donovan, I'm not hiding. That's what they want. I show up at the Titan meeting tomorrow in a suit, I give my presentation, I do my job. Business as usual. There's nothing usual about this. Then we make it usual. We normalize holding people accountable. We normalize consequences for discrimination. Natasha was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight he recognized, the weight of someone about to say something he wouldn't want to hear. I found something in the Titan files. You need to know before the board meeting. What? Derek wasn't the only one skimming. There's a pattern across 3 departments, logistics, procurement, and sales. It's not just one bad actor, it's systemic. Donovan's head throbbed. He pressed his fingers to his temples. How much are we talking? Conservative estimate? 8 million over 4 years, could be more once we dig deeper. 8 million. Stolen from workers, from operations, from the company's future. And he was about to walk into a board meeting where some of those board members might have known, might have enabled, might have profited. Get me a full audit by tomorrow morning. Every department, every manager, every expense report. I want to know who knew and who helped. That's going to cost. I don't care. Spend whatever it takes. We're burning this rot out completely or we're not doing this at all. He hung up and sat down on a bench, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had sustained him through the confrontation was draining away, leaving behind the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd just fought a war. His phone buzzed again. Dr. Imani Okoye, he answered. I know what you're going to say. Do you? Her voice was warm but firm, the tone she used when he was being brilliant and stupid simultaneously. You just declared war on an entire industry, Donovan. The airline industry, the corporate embezzlement industry, the protect your own at all costs industry. They're going to come for you. Let them. That's the part that worries me. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for every person who's been discriminated against, every worker who's been stolen from, every passenger who's been humiliated. That's a noble fight. It's also an exhausting one. And you can't win them all. I can try. You can burn out trying. Promise me you'll remember why you started Ether Logic in the first place. To build something, not to destroy everything. Her words landed in the center of his chest, heavy and true. He thought about the 4 VCs who'd rejected him, the garage apartment, the maxed credit cards. He'd built Ether Logic to prove he could create value, not just extract revenge. I promise. Good. Now go to your hotel, sleep for 4 hours, and then change the world in that order. She hung up, leaving Donovan alone with the sunrise and the weight of what came next. 4 months later, the courtroom in the Southern District of New York felt less like a temple of justice and more like a pressure cooker ready to explode. April rain lashed the tall windows, each drop a tiny percussion against glass, while inside, 200 people packed into seats designed for half that number. The overflow crowd stood against the back wall, reporters clutching notebooks, sketch artists working furiously, and in the front row of the gallery, 14 factory workers who'd taken unpaid leave to watch the man who'd stolen their futures face his reckoning. Donovan Kane sat 3 rows back on the prosecution side, hands folded in his lap, wearing a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than Derek Vanderbilt's first car. The Patek Philippe was visible now. No more hiding. The world knew who he was. Forbes had run a cover story. Time named him to their next generation leaders list. But none of that mattered today. Today was about the 1,400 people who'd clocked in at Titan Manufacturing for decades, trusting their employer to protect what they'd earned. The prosecution's table was a fortress of evidence. Bankers' boxes stacked 4 high, laptop screens glowing with spreadsheets that told stories of systematic theft. Lead prosecutor Amanda Reeves looked like she'd been carved from marble. Unsmiling, gray suit, hair pulled back so severely it could have been a weapon. She'd built her reputation destroying white-collar criminals who thought wealth made them immune to consequence. Across the aisle, Derek sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit from Men's Warehouse, his assets frozen, his designer wardrobe auctioned to pay restitution. He'd lost 30 pounds since New Year's Eve. His hair, once shellacked into submission, now hung limp and greasy. The man who'd bragged about $5,000 hours now had a public defender because his retained attorney had quit when Derek's retainer check bounced. Judge Margaret Chen entered and everyone rose. She was 68, a former prosecutor who'd seen every trick, every excuse, every performative tear shed by defendants who'd show no mercy to their victims. She settled into her chair with the efficiency of someone who'd presided over hundreds of trials and had exactly 0 patience for theatrics. Be seated. United States versus Derek Vanderbilt, case number 24-CR-1847. Are we ready to proceed? Amanda Reeves stood, her voice carrying the weight of 3 months' investigation. The government is ready, Your Honor. Derek's public defender, a tired-looking man named Gerald Hastings who'd been assigned this case as punishment for losing a motion the week prior, rose slowly. Defense is ready. Ms. Reeves, call your first witness. The government calls Donovan Kane. The courtroom shifted, a collective intake of breath. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. The video had shown what happened on the plane, but video didn't capture internal experience. Video couldn't testify about what it felt like to be judged by your clothing, threatened by authority, dragged bleeding down an aisle while hundreds watched. Donovan stood and walked to the witness stand, right hand raised. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Amanda Reeves approached with a tablet in hand, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Mr. Kane, can you please state your occupation for the record? I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Ether Logic, a technology acquisition and optimization firm based in Chicago. And what is Ether Logic's relationship to Titan Manufacturing? As of January 1st of this year, EtherLogic acquired 51% controlling interest in Titan Manufacturing for $340 million. When did you first become aware of financial irregularities at Titan? Donovan's voice was steady, factual. During due diligence in November, our forensic accounting team flagged unusual variance in logistics and sales expenses, specifically $2.8 million categorized as external consulting services with no corresponding contracts, deliverables, or consultant identities. What did you do with that information? I flagged it for post-acquisition audit. At the time, we didn't have access to Titan's full financial systems. The deal wasn't closed. Amanda pulled up a document on the courtroom's display screens, a spreadsheet covered in highlighted rows. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence Government Exhibit 12, the Q4 expense report from Titan Manufacturing's sales division. So entered. Amanda turned back to Donovan. Can you explain what we're looking at? This shows expenses submitted by the sales division between October and December. The highlighted rows are phantom consulting fees, payments made to shell companies that provided no actual services. The money was transferred to offshore accounts, then withdrawn as cash or moved to secondary accounts. Who approved these expenses? Derek Vanderbilt. His digital signature is on every authorization. Derek's attorney shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is not a forensic accountant. He's the CEO of the company that conducted the audit, Mr. Hastings. I'll allow it. Overruled. Amanda continued. Mr. Kane, I want to take you back to December 31st. You were traveling to London for the acquisition finalization meeting, correct? Yes. And you were seated in first class, seat 2A. I had a ticket for 2A. I never made it to the seat. Why not? Donovan's jaw tightened, the only visible sign of the memory's weight. Derek Vanderbilt was already sitting there. When I showed him my boarding pass, he refused to move. He told me I belonged in economy, that I must be confused and that people like me couldn't afford first-class tickets. People like you. What did you understand that to mean? He made it clear through his language and tone that he was referring to my race. Derek's lawyer stood again. Objection, speculation. Your Honor, Amanda cut in smoothly, we have video evidence of the encounter. The jury can judge for themselves what was meant. I'll allow the witness to answer. Proceed. Donovan met the jury's eyes. 7 women, 5 men, ranging from a retired teacher to a construction foreman. They were the people Derek had called nobodies in his LinkedIn messages to colleagues. They were the ones who mattered now. He looked at my clothing and made assumptions about my worth, my intelligence, and my right to occupy the same space he did. When I politely asked him to check his boarding pass, he laughed. When the flight attendant confirmed I was right and he was wrong, he still refused to move. He threatened the airline employee, name-dropped executives, and claimed medical necessity. All lies. What happened next? I gave up my seat. The flight was already delayed by weather. 300 people needed to get to London, and if I pushed the issue, security would have removed him. We'd have missed the takeoff window, and everyone would have been stranded. So I took his seat in premium economy. Did Mr. Vanderbilt say anything as you left? Donovan's voice dropped, remembering. He said, "Smart move, kid. Go sit where you fit in." The courtroom was silent except for the rain and the scratch of sketch artists' pencils. And where was Mr. Vanderbilt's assigned seat? 17C Premium Economy, not first class. Amanda let that hang in the air before continuing. Later in the flight, there was a medical emergency, correct? Harrison Caldwell, Titan's outgoing CEO, suffered a cardiac event during severe turbulence. I have wilderness first responder certification, so when the call went out for medical assistance, I went to help. Where was Mr. Vanderbilt during this emergency? Donovan's eyes found Derek across the courtroom. The defendant looked away. In seat 2A, the seat he'd stolen. He'd been drinking heavily, mimosas and scotch. When Mr. Caldwell reached for him, asking for help getting his medication, Derek pushed his hand away and told him to stop wrinkling his suit. Gasps echoed through the gallery. One of the jurors, a woman in her 50s, closed her eyes and shook her head. "What did you do?" "I administered Mr. Caldwell's nitroglycerin, secured oxygen, and stabilized him until the turbulence passed. I stayed with him for the remainder of the flight." "And during this time, did you have a conversation with Mr. Caldwell and the defendant?" "Yes. Mr. Caldwell recognized me as the new owner of Titan. He had the acquisition documents in his briefcase. He revealed my identity to Derek." "How did the defendant react?" "He panicked. Then he tried to justify himself. Then he confessed." Derek's attorney was on his feet. "Objection. The defendant was under duress, medical emergency, turbulence, altitude affecting judgment." Judge Chen's eyes were ice. "Mr. Hastings, are you arguing your client was too impaired to be held responsible for his own words? Because if so, you're making the prosecution's case for them." Hastings sat down, realizing his mistake too late. Amanda pulled up another document. Government Exhibit 23, a transcript of the conversation as recounted by 3 witnesses, Mr. Kane, Mr. Caldwell, and flight attendant Lauren Hayes. "Mr. Kane, is this accurate?" Donovan scanned the page. "Yes." "Can you read the highlighted section for the jury?" Donovan's voice was clear, each word a nail. Derek Vanderbilt stated, and I quote, "I move inventory between the warehouse in Jersey and the depot in Leeds to cover quarterly shortfalls. It's a shell game. I already moved $2 million into a Cayman consulting shell company, GVB Holdings. If the new boss keeps me, I put it back. If he fires me, it's my severance package." The jury leaned forward collectively like plants bending toward sunlight. "Did he say anything else?" "Yes." When Mr. Caldwell questioned whether that was risky, Derek laughed and said, "I've already moved $2 million to the Caymans. I call it my severance package. If he keeps me, I'll put it back. If he cuts me, poof, it's gone." "And was there more?" Donovan turned the page. "He mentioned a second account. Malta, $800,000. He said he'd faked supplier invoices to cover it. When I asked about a yacht I'd seen on his Instagram, he initially denied owning it, then admitted it was a rental that he'd expensed as team building in the Bahamas. But his entire sales team was in Munich that week for a trade show." Amanda turned to the jury. All of this, unprompted, no interrogation, no coercion. Just a man who thought he was untouchable, bragging to someone he believed was beneath him. "Objection. Argumentative." "Sustained. Move on, Ms. Reeves." Amanda approached the witness stand, her voice softer now. "Mr. Kane, when you landed in London, what did you do?" "I had Derek arrested." "Why?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. "Why not just fire him quietly? Why not settle out of court? Why drag this into public?" Donovan leaned forward, and when he spoke, every person in that courtroom felt the weight of his conviction. "Because he didn't just steal from a company. He stole from people. 1,400 workers who trusted their employer to safeguard their pensions, their benefits, their futures. When you embezzle from a corporation, you're not robbing some abstract entity. You're taking food off tables. You're stealing college funds and retirement dreams. You're telling people that their years of labor are worth less than your yacht rental." His eyes found the factory workers in the front row. "I arrested him because silence is complicity. Because if I'd settled quietly, he'd have moved to another company and done it again. Because accountability isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure everyone who comes after is protected." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of one factory worker, a woman in her 60s named Rosa Martinez, crying softly into her hands. Amanda let the moment breathe before asking her final question. "No further questions, Your Honor." Derek's attorney approached for cross-examination, clutching a legal pad covered in frantic scrawl. Gerald Hastings was not a bad lawyer. He was just a tired one, and he knew he was defending the indefensible. Mr. Kane, you run a company worth billions, correct? 2.1 billion as of this morning's market valuation. And you flew to London in coach. Excuse me, premium economy, wearing a hoodie and sweatpants? I gave up my first-class seat to avoid delaying the flight. But you regularly wear casual clothing despite your wealth? I wear what's comfortable. Isn't it possible, Mr. Kane, that Mr. Vanderbilt simply didn't recognize you? That this was a case of mistaken identity rather than discrimination? Donovan's expression didn't change. He didn't need to recognize me. He needed to respect a boarding pass. But you admit you don't look like a typical CEO. Objection! Amanda was on her feet. Counsel is literally proving the discrimination case for us. Judge Chen removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Mr. Hastings, are you seriously arguing that your client was justified in stealing a seat because the rightful passenger wasn't dressed CEO appropriate? Because if so, I'm going to instruct the jury to find in favor of a hostile work environment claim as well. Hastings backpedaled. I'm simply establishing that there may have been confusion. There was no confusion, Donovan interrupted calmly. There was racism, there was theft, and there was a man so convinced of his superiority that he bragged about embezzlement to the person who owned his company. That's not confusion. That's hubris. Hastings shuffled his papers, tried another angle. You mentioned that you were angry about being treated poorly. I didn't say I was angry, but you must have been upset. I was disappointed. There's a difference. Anger clouds judgment, disappointment clarifies it. And in your clarity, you decided to ruin my client's life? No, your client ruined his own life. I simply documented it. Hastings had nothing left. No further questions. The prosecution called 6 more witnesses over the next 3 days. Forensic accountant Rebecca Sue walked the jury through spreadsheets, showing the paper trail from Titan's accounts to shell companies to offshore banks to cash withdrawals. FBI agent Marcus Thornton testified about international wire fraud. Harrison Caldwell, recovered from his cardiac event, described watching Derek confess while showing zero remorse for letting a man potentially die. But the most devastating testimony came from 4 people Donovan had spent weeks tracking down. 4 voices the system had tried to silence. Dr. Kira Washington took the stand on day 4, wearing surgical scrubs under her blazer because she'd come directly from a 16-hour shift at Mount Sinai. She was 41, black, and carried herself with the exhausted dignity of someone who saved lives for a living. Dr. Washington, can you describe your encounter with Celeste Hargrove on Delta Flight 482 in June 2019? Kira's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. I was flying first class to a medical conference in London. I'd just completed a 16-hour craniotomy, brain surgery. I was exhausted. When I boarded, Ms. Hargrove stopped me and asked if I was sure I was in the right section. I showed her my boarding pass. She scrutinized it, then asked to see my medical license. Your medical license? Why? She said, and I quote, I need to verify you can actually afford this ticket. As if my profession was suspicious, as if a black woman in first class must have committed fraud. What did you do? I showed her my license. She examined it like it might be fake, then reluctantly let me sit down. But for the entire flight, she questioned everything. My meal choice. She suggested the chicken instead of the beef I'd ordered, saying, people like you usually prefer chicken. When I asked for wine, she asked if I was sure I could handle it after such a long shift, implying I might be intoxicated. I filed a complaint when we landed. What happened to that complaint? Nothing. I received a form letter thanking me for my feedback. No investigation, no apology, no change. Amanda pulled up an email chain. Government Exhibit 47, Internal Delta Communications regarding your complaint. Can you read the highlighted portion? Kira's voice cracked slightly. Regional Manager Patricia York to Celeste Hargrove. Another complaint. Just be more subtle next time. These people are looking for reasons to be offended. The jury looked ill. Jamal Foster testified next, 38, software engineer, wearing a hoodie similar to Donovan's. His story mirrored Kira's with eerie precision. Questioned boarding pass, suggested meal changes, implicit assumptions about his inability to afford the ticket he'd legally purchased. "I had video," Jamal explained, pulling out his phone. "I recorded the interaction because I knew no one would believe me otherwise. I submitted it with my complaint." "What happened?" Patricia York wrote back saying there was insufficient evidence of discriminatory intent. "I'd sent her a video. She called it insufficient." Reverend Ezekiel Adeyemi, 55, spoke with the measured cadence of someone who'd spent decades counseling his congregation through injustice. He recounted Celeste refusing to serve him his pre-ordered vegetarian Hindu meal, insisting he'd want chicken instead because, in her words, that's what people like you eat. "I'm Nigerian Christian," Ezekiel clarified for the jury. "I'd ordered vegetarian for health reasons. She made assumptions based on my skin, not my actual needs. When I corrected her, she became hostile, suggesting I was being difficult." The fourth victim broke the courtroom's composure entirely. Gabriella Rains was 29, a former professional dancer whose career ended when a drunk driver ran a red light and crushed her left leg below the knee. She walked to the stand with a visible prosthetic, each step deliberate. "Ms. Rains, can you describe your experience on Delta Flight 891 in March 2023? Gabriella's voice was quiet but unwavering. "I was flying first class to see my father. He was dying of cancer in London. I'd spent my savings on the ticket because I needed to get there fast, and I needed the space for my leg. Sitting in economy for 8 hours causes severe pain with the prosthetic." "What happened when you boarded?" "Celeste Hargrove saw my prosthetic and asked if I was sure I could fit comfortably in the seat, not out of concern, out of disdain. She suggested I might be more comfortable in the back where there's more room to stretch out, even though economy has less legroom. When I showed her my boarding pass and explained about my leg, she said, 'Maybe you should have thought about that before booking first class.'" The jury was visibly angry now. 2 of them had tears in their eyes. "I was traveling to say goodbye to my dying father, and she treated me like I was trying to scam an upgrade. I filed a complaint." Patricia York responded that the flight attendant was expressing concern for my comfort and no action would be taken. Amanda approached the witness stand. "Ms. Rains, how did you lose your leg?" "Car accident, drunk driver. I was 26 at the peak of my dance career. He ran a red light going 70 in a 35 zone, crushed my leg so badly they couldn't save it." "And how did Ms. Hargrove's comment make you feel?" Gabriella's composure finally cracked. "Like I was being punished for surviving. Like my disability made me less deserving of dignity. I'd lost my career, my leg, and was about to lose my father. And she couldn't offer basic human decency because I didn't look like her idea of who belongs in first class." Amanda let the testimony sit before asking her final question. "If Delta had investigated your complaint, if Patricia York had taken you seriously, what would you have wanted?" "Training, accountability, assurance that it wouldn't happen to the next person. I didn't want money, I wanted change." "No further questions." The defense had nothing. Gerald Hastings stood, looked at Gabriella, and sat back down without asking a single question. Even he had limits. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented 47 exhibits, 12 witnesses, and a money trail so clear it might as well have been lit with neon signs. The defense's case lasted 90 minutes and consisted entirely of Derek's mother testifying that he'd always been a good boy who made mistakes under pressure. On a Friday afternoon in late April, the jury deliberated for 90 minutes before returning with verdicts. "On the count of wire fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the count of embezzlement?" "Guilty." "On the count of money laundering?" "Guilty." "On the count of filing false financial documents?" "Guilty." "Guilty on all 14 counts." Derek's face crumpled. His mother wailed from the gallery. His public defender looked relieved it was over. Judge Chen set sentencing for 3 weeks out, but her tone left no mystery about what was coming. Mr. Vanderbilt, you stole from people who work for a living because you believed yourself entitled to luxuries you hadn't earned. You showed no remorse when caught, only anger at being held accountable. This court will consider the full extent of the law. 3 weeks later, Derek Vanderbilt stood before Judge Chen in the same ill-fitting suit, 20 pounds lighter, looking like a ghost of the man who'd stolen a seat on New Year's Eve. Mr. Vanderbilt, you have been convicted of 14 felony counts. Before I impose sentence, do you wish to address the court? Derek's attorney advised him to stay silent, but Derek stood anyway, perhaps hoping for mercy he'd never shown others. Your Honor, I made mistakes. I was under financial pressure. 2 ex-wives, a daughter in college, expenses that spiraled beyond my control. I never meant to hurt anyone. I thought I could pay it back. You thought you wouldn't get caught, Judge Chen interrupted. You thought your position protected you. You thought the people you stole from were beneath your notice. You were wrong on all counts. She pulled out a document, reading from prepared remarks. The presentencing report details a pattern of entitlement spanning your entire career. Inflated expense reports dating back a decade. Harassment complaints from subordinates that were buried by supervisors. A history of treating service workers with contempt. This isn't a case of one mistake under pressure. This is who you are. Derek's lawyer tried to interject. Your Honor, my client has already lost everything. His career, his reputation, his savings. His savings? Judge Chen's voice could have cut steel. He stole $8 million. That's not savings, that's evidence. As for his reputation, he built that himself through his actions. I'm simply acknowledging reality. She turned back to Derek. You showed Mr. Kane no mercy when you assumed he was powerless. You showed Mr. Caldwell no mercy when he was dying. You showed 1,400 workers no mercy when you stole their pensions. This court will extend you the same consideration you showed them. The gavel fell like thunder. On counts 1 through 7, wire fraud and embezzlement, I sentence you to 6 years in federal prison on each count to run concurrently. On counts 8 through 14, money laundering and false documents, I sentence you to 4 years on each count to run concurrently with the previous sentence. Total, 6 years in federal custody followed by 3 years supervised release. You are ordered to pay full restitution of $8 million plus interest, and you are permanently barred from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company. Derek collapsed into his chair, the air rushing out of him like he'd been struck. But Judge Chen wasn't finished. Additionally, I'm ordering this transcript and video evidence to be forwarded to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. The discrimination on that aircraft, the subsequent investigation revealing systemic bias at Delta Airlines, and the corporate cover-up merit federal investigation. Ms. Reeves, please coordinate with DOJ on that matter. She looked out at the gallery where Donovan sat, surrounded by factory workers who'd taken the day off to see justice delivered. Mr. Kane, the court recognizes your cooperation with this investigation. More importantly, the court recognizes that you could have settled quietly, taken your money, and walked away. Instead, you chose accountability. You chose to protect workers you'd never met. That choice matters. It changes things. Donovan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. 6 months after the trial, Donovan stood in a conference room at Titan Manufacturing's Chicago headquarters, looking out at 1,400 faces. The workers had gathered in the main factory floor, the first all-hands meeting since the acquisition closed. They were nervous. Every corporate acquisition in history ended the same way: layoffs, outsourcing, the slow death of communities built around stable employment. Donovan walked onto a makeshift stage, really just a raised platform near the assembly line. He wore jeans and a navy sweater, the Patek Philippe visible but not ostentatious. Behind him, Harrison Caldwell sat in a chair, still recovering but strong enough to witness this moment. Good morning. My name is Donovan Kane, and I'm the CEO of Ether Logic. As of 6 months ago, my company owns 51% of Titan Manufacturing, which means I work for you now. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. You heard that right. You work for a company I own, but I work for you. Because without you, Titan is just a building and some machines. You're the ones who build turbines that power cities. You're the ones who show up at 5 a.m. and leave at 6 p.m. You're the ones who made this company worth buying. He pulled out a document. Derek Vanderbilt stole $8 million from this company over 4 years. The court ordered him to pay it back, but honestly, we'll be lucky to recover $2 million after his assets are liquidated. That leaves a $6 million hole. The crowd tensed. Here it comes, the layoffs, the benefit cuts. I'm not here to tell you we're making that up through your labor. I'm here to tell you we already made it up through efficiency improvements and new contracts. And the recovered $2 million, that's going into your pockets. Silence. Then one voice from the back. What? Every worker employed at Titan for more than 5 years is getting a bonus. It's not huge. Works out to about $1,400 per person after taxes. But it's yours. You earned it. Derek stole it. Now you're getting it back. The factory erupted. Applause, shouts, tears. Rosa Martinez, the woman who'd cried in the courtroom, stood on her chair and whistled loud enough to echo off the steel rafters. Donovan waited for the noise to die down before continuing. But that's not the only change. Effective immediately, I'm establishing an independent ethics hotline. Any complaint about discrimination, harassment, or financial irregularities goes to a third-party firm. Not to management, not to HR, directly to investigators who report to the board. No more buried complaints, no more Patricia Yorks. More applause. Second, we're implementing quarterly transparency reports. You'll see the same financial data the board sees. Salaries, expenses, profit margins, all of it. No more mysterious consulting fees, no more shell games. You have a right to know where your labor goes. A hand shot up. A machinist named James Wu who'd worked at Titan for 23 years. What about the other executives, the ones who helped Derek? Good question. We found evidence of complicity in procurement and logistics. 8 managers who either participated in or ignored the fraud. All 8 were terminated for cause, their pensions forfeited, their severance voided, and 3 of them are facing criminal charges. Donovan pulled up a slide showing the new organizational chart. I'm promoting from within to fill those positions. People who've been here, who know the work, who didn't steal from their colleagues. Your new VP of Operations is Teresa Grant. She's been a line supervisor for 15 years. Your new head of logistics is Michael Chen. Started in the warehouse, worked his way up. These are people who understand that leadership is service, not extraction. The applause was deafening now, but Donovan wasn't done. He gestured to someone in the front row, and Lauren Hayes, the flight attendant from New Year's Eve, walked onto the stage. She wore a professional blazer, her hair pulled back, looking simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. This is Lauren Hayes. 6 months ago, she was a Delta flight attendant making $42,000 a year, working flights where passengers treated her like a servant. She showed courage when it mattered, standing up to a bully even when it put her job at risk. I've hired her as Titan's new Director of Corporate Culture and Employee Relations. Her job is to make sure what happened at Delta never happens here. She reports directly to me, not to HR, and her salary is $140,000 plus equity. Lauren's eyes were wet, but her voice was strong when she spoke. Thank you, Mr. Kane. I promise I'll earn this. You already have. As the meeting wound down and workers returned to their stations, Harrison Caldwell approached Donovan, moving slowly but steadily. The older man's cardiac event had been a warning, not a death sentence, and he'd taken it seriously. Medication, diet changes, reduced stress. You didn't have to give them the bonus. Legally, that money belongs to the company. Legally, yes. Morally, it always belonged to them. Harrison smiled. You're going to ruin the curve for every other CEO, you know that? Making us all look bad by actually giving a damn. Good. Maybe it'll become contagious. They walked through the factory floor together, past machines that had run for 40 years, past workers who nodded respectfully but didn't fawn. This wasn't hero worship. This was mutual respect between people who valued the same thing, honest work for honest pay. "What's next for you?" Harrison asked. Donovan pulled out his phone, showed Harrison an email from Senator Elizabeth Warren's office. "Congressional testimony. The Senate Commerce Committee wants to investigate systemic discrimination in the airline industry. They're calling me, Kira, Jamal, Ezekiel, and Gabriella to testify." "Are you ready for that fight?" "I don't think anyone's ever ready for Congress, but the alternative is staying silent. And silence is how Derek Vanderbilt got away with it for a decade." They reached Donovan's car, a Tesla Model S, practical and efficient. As he opened the door, Harrison put a hand on his shoulder. "For what it's worth, I'm proud to have been there that night, to witness the beginning of all this. Even the heart attack part, especially that part, showed me what kind of man you are when no one's watching, or when everyone's watching and you still choose right over easy." Donovan drove back to Chicago as the sun set over the industrial corridor, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. His phone buzzed continuously. Messages from Natasha about the next acquisition, from Dr. Amani about an upcoming speaking engagement, from his PR team about interview requests. But the message that made him smile came from an unknown number. "Mr. Kane, this is Elijah Morrison. You gave me your seat on a flight last month and told me to call when I graduated. I just got accepted to MIT for computer science. Thank you for believing in me." Donovan pulled over, typed a response. "Congratulations, Elijah. Call my office Monday. We'll talk about your summer internship. And it's Donovan, not Mr. Kane. We're colleagues now." He sat in the car for a moment, watching the sun disappear below the horizon, thinking about Derek Vanderbilt in federal prison, about Celeste Hargrove working night shifts after losing her pension, about Patricia York unemployed and unemployable. Their consequences had rippled exactly as intended. Not revenge, accountability, and in the space left by their absence, something better was growing. 4 months after Donovan's testimony, Senator Warren introduced the Passenger Dignity Protection Act. It mandated quarterly public reporting of discrimination complaints, third-party investigation of all incidents, and 400% compensation for victims plus punitive damages. The bill passed with bipartisan support. Nobody wanted to be on record defending racism at 35,000 feet. Delta Airlines fired 23 employees total, restructured their complaint system, and hired Dr. Kira Washington as their first chief diversity officer at a salary that made her the highest-paid executive in the company. Stock prices initially dropped 14%, but recovered within 6 months as reforms took hold and customer confidence returned. 11 other airlines adopted similar policies preemptively, terrified of becoming the next viral scandal. Discrimination complaints across the industry dropped 67% in the first year. And on New Year's Eve 2025, exactly 1 year after the flight that changed everything, Donovan Kane stood in the same JFK Sky Club, wearing the same Loro Piana hoodie, waiting for the same flight to London. The lounge attendant, Melissa, who'd helped him that first night, smiled with genuine warmth. "Mr. Kane, happy to see you again. Seat 2A is ready. We've had no issues this time." "I appreciate that, Melissa." He walked to the gate, noticing how the atmosphere had shifted. Gate agents smiled at passengers regardless of clothing. Flight attendants welcomed everyone with equal professionalism. The culture had changed, visibly, measurably. As he reached the gate, he saw a young black teenager struggling with an agent who was questioning his scholarship documentation. The kid looked terrified, 16, maybe 17, wearing a hoodie similar to Donovan's, holding a boarding pass to London with shaking hands. Donovan started to intervene, but before he could move, a supervisor appeared. A woman Donovan didn't recognize, wearing a name tag that said, Training Supervisor. "What's happening here?" The gate agent stammered. "I was just verifying." "You were discriminating. This passenger has valid documentation. Apologize immediately." The agent's face went white. "I'm sorry, please board, sir." The teenager, Elijah Morrison, Donovan realized with a start, walked past, saw Donovan, and his eyes went wide with recognition. "Mr. Kane, Elijah, how's MIT treating you?" "It's amazing. I'm flying to London for a semester abroad program. First time in first class, the school upgraded me as part of the scholarship." Donovan handed him a business card. "Enjoy the flight, and when you get back, we still need to talk about that internship." Thank you for everything, for not staying silent." Donovan boarded, settled into 2A, and watched Elijah take a seat across the aisle. The kid pulled out a laptop covered in MIT stickers and lost himself in code, the same way Donovan had in his garage apartment 8 years ago. The plane pushed back from the gate as midnight approached, the captain's voice wishing everyone a happy new year. Through the window, Donovan could see fireworks beginning to erupt across the New York skyline, gold and silver bursts against the velvet night. He pulled out his phone, sent one final message to Dr. Imani. "You were right. Change doesn't happen because bad people get punished. It happens because good people refuse to stay silent. Happy New Year, Doc." Her response came immediately. "Proud of you, always. Now stop texting and get some sleep. You have a world to fix tomorrow." He smiled, switched the phone to airplane mode, and leaned back in the seat he'd paid for, the seat he'd earned, the seat no one could take from him now, not because of his wealth, but because the system had finally learned that dignity isn't negotiable. The plane lifted into the night sky, carrying Donovan Kane toward whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that behind him, the world was slightly better than it had been yesterday. And tomorrow, it would be better still.